Pam, I changed the subtitle a little bit because, because the internet. A little about me. As Pam said, my name is John Habibi. I am half American, half Palestinian. That's where you get the American first name, Arabic last name. I'm all about music. If you want to hear me speak quickly and loudly, just mention an album that I'm into, show me something new, and I will just take off with it. If you haven't heard Phoenix by Pedro the Lion, released like 2 years ago, it's still my thing. My wife is lurking in here, Mina Habibi. She went to MSU, so it's possible you would know her as Mina Ibrahim. And we also have a daughter named Zara, who's a year and a half. And mine is also half Palestinian, so that means that our daughter is 100% half Palestinian. I'm a huge board gamer. I often say I collect way quicker than I can play, more of a board game collector. And it's not that I buy games left and right, it's just that I buy them quicker than I can play them. And lastly, I am a programmer. I started my journey, maybe around 2015. I currently work for Halliburton. Our stack is Python, Django, Angular JS. If you're familiar with Angular, then you know when someone says Angular JS, they're talking about version 1. So very old, obsolete. It's a sore point for me. And we're also using CoffeeScript. You can find my socials, they're limited, but if you go to johnhabibi.dev, it'll redirect you to my Keybase, where I've verified my identity on a couple things. So I did not think that I would be a programmer in 2014. I always wanted to work in music since like 7th grade. And that was kind of my goal. But most of the jobs that I took were just kind of happenstance, right? Like I just needed to pay bills. I needed to pay rent. Wanted some spending money early on. So I went to school at Evangel University in Springfield. And while I was there, I just wanted to move off campus. I'll let you decide why I would want to do that. And applied to work at the airport. Honestly, I thought I was going to be a skycap, the people that push wheelchairs, ferry your luggage. I did not intend to work directly in aviation, but I did. I ended up working for the city, but we were handling Allegiant Air. So I was doing everything above wing and below wing and never really set out to work in aviation. I spent 4 years doing that. After college, I worked there for another year and decided that if I was going to work in music, Springfield would not be it for me because I'm just not that entrepreneurial. There's a lot of great studios in Springfield. There's great musicians, but in cities like Springfield and Tulsa, you have to really, really hustle if you're going to make any sort of living in that. And that's not me. But at the time, I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this, let's do it. So we moved to Northern California, about an hour north of San Francisco, where I took an unpaid internship for 3 months. It's not quite as expensive as San Francisco up in Santa Rosa, but it's still very expensive. So when that internship ended, I fell back. It's not listed here, but on aviation. I worked at an airport out there, started doing assistant engineering and studio sessions, and started doing live sound. But a couple months of that, and we decided it just wasn't going to be for us. So we moved back to this region. We moved to Tulsa, gave that a shot. We're still here. And that exhausted our finances, as you could imagine. We didn't have much when we went to California. We worked a lot to remain in California and spent what little was left over to come back to this part of the country. So again, I'm left looking for a job. And I applied through an employment agency, thought I would be working for FedEx as holiday help. And then a day after that interview, they said, hey, we've actually offered this to too many people. But can you go to the city of Tulsa and work in the city clerk's office? And I needed a job. So I said, yes, absolutely. So I was there for 2.5 years. Again, didn't intend to work in municipal government. I was open-minded about it when I got there. but quickly realized that it wasn't for me. The city clerk's office, especially, as the name implies, it's a lot of clerical work, a lot of paperwork, a lot of deadlines, a lot of details. And if you're not passionate about government, then those details probably will just grind at you, which is what they did to me. I would go home in the evenings exhausted and depleted and feeling like there just had to be more, right? Had to be something else I could do. And again, at this point, wasn't thinking about programming at all until I met a friend here in Tulsa who was working for a remote company, working remotely for a company out of San Francisco. And he had great things to say, right? He's making a San Francisco salary, but he's living in a much cheaper place, Tulsa. He's traveling to conferences. They're taking care of him on that. When he is away, they're like sending care packages to his wife, just so they, she feels appreciated while he's gone. Really, really cool. And he suggests that I learn Ruby on Rails. And that was intimidating. I learned HTML and CSS in high school, and a couple friends in high school went beyond that and started learning Java and C++, and I just slammed on the brakes because I just didn't think I could do it, right? Because to me, it was math, and I wasn't into math. And so I just didn't think about it. But seeing the benefits of a career in development and programming, I decided that it was at least worth a shot because I already had an interest in the technical side of things. And yeah, so that led me to being a web developer for 3.5 years at this point. That involved a course, I can't even remember the name now. It was a full stack course. If you've looked at all, and I'm sure some of you have done these courses or know what I'm talking about at the least, but they can be very expensive. I just saw a guy I really appreciate and respect released a new course for $300. And even now I'm like, I can't spend $300 on a course, right? But this new course came out by a guy named Rob Day. And I think because it was brand new and it was his first attempt at doing an online course, it was like $12. So I picked it up, and it was confusing. And I would spend about 2 hours every day after work, 2 to 4 hours, trying to get a grasp on this. I was constantly setting goals, and then I was not reaching them, because how do you know how long something is going to take you when you've never done it before? It was hard. I was constantly confused about syntax because I was learning JavaScript, which I hadn't really done a lot of. I was learning Ruby. I was learning Rails. I think there was even like some SQL thrown in there. And so I was constantly not knowing what I should be typing. I knew more or less what I wanted to happen, but I did not know what to type, what to do, and how those things interacted with each other. I completed the course. I built the guided applications, but at the end of it, I had no clue how to reproduce that or how to do something on my own with that knowledge. And honestly, it didn't seem helpful after the course was over. I just wrote it off. I thought it was too confusing. I think now if I went back, I might see it differently, and it might just be that when you are starting out, you're drinking from the fire hose and you don't really know any of it, and it's all overwhelming. And that leads us to all that. I mean, programming is hard. I was told when I was exploring Ruby on Rails that it was like basic English. And maybe that's true if you already understand programming, right? Like, yeah, I see what you're saying, but there are words that are magical in programming languages, and they're few and far between. Everything else doesn't do anything until you tell it what it should do. It's like nothing else I've ever done. Like I said, I wanted to work in music, and I went to school for music, but even then I wasn't like the music theory guy. It was all about emotion and my gut and just what I felt or wanted to hear. And programming is not like that. I mean, maybe the end product can encapsulate that, but the actual day-to-day is not really like that. There's so much to know and so much involved just to get, once you get out of the view. I think most of us can get HTML and CSS pretty quick. And there's a lot you can do there even. Like, I'm sure you've seen these full-on art pieces that people do just with HTML and CSS. It's pretty incredible. Most of us don't need to do that. But even then, once we get past that, it's a whole other beast. And it's technical, right? So when do I use a single quote? When do I use a double quote? Is this a strongly typed language? Is it weakly typed? Do spaces matter? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, right? It all depends on what you're working in. And then it gets really technical if you've had the pleasure, and it really is a pleasure, of working with other people on the same thing. Because sometimes even when we come to the same solution, we got there for different reasons and we want to talk about it, right? And so for someone just learning, you can really get lost in all of that. The knowledge gap, when you go to school for computer science, it takes 4 years, right? At least. And then if you go on to do a master's. So when we take this on our own, even if we're using a course online, we are taking on quite the challenge. And I think the benefit of that is college courses are paced. So no matter what, it's going to take you this long. Whereas sometimes some things come to us quicker than they would if we were in a college classroom. But also there's a lot of really heavy concepts that build upon each other. And, you know, I think we can see here some technical differences. At first I thought, I'm showing a React example, I should probably show an Angular example or a Vue, but really this is probably what you will see in your code base, right? You will have some sort of backend, in this case maybe built on Java, and you'll have a React front end, and they're doing the same thing more or less, but they're using different words and different formatting. And that's where I think things get really, really confusing. If you can do that successfully though, you've made your own language, right? So here's what Michael Hartle says. And he created the the Rails tutorial, which is kind of like, for a long time, it's been the entry point to Ruby on Rails. He also is the co-creator of an online course now that I highly recommend called the Learn Enough Society, where he literally will take you from command line, from Git, your text editor, all the way up to Ruby, Rails, really, you know, advanced Rails concepts. And in any other courses so far, I haven't seen someone start with command line, right? Because as a new developer, we're used to clicking on icons and it goes. But it's really a good course. But this is what he says. He actually coined this phrase, technical sophistication. He says, in addition to hard skills like familiarity with text editors and the Unix command line, technical sophistication includes soft skills, like looking for promising menu items and knowing the kinds of search terms to drop into Google or DuckDuckGo, along with an attitude of doing what it takes to make the machine do our bidding. So I think really the last part is the most important part. We really have to have an attitude of perseverance. You need to remind yourself that it will be rewarding when we figure this out. A lot of times, the final product we're excited about if we're building our own thing. And we can forget that, but the actual pursuit of knowledge should be, as a good programmer, the thing that really gets you excited. Trial and error, we need to fail quickly and learn from our mistakes. There's no harm in just trying. Just put things together, see what you can come up with on your own. Really good programmers, though, are researchers. We're sleuthers, right? We're sleuths. So we are really good at looking up things on the internet and not walking textbooks, right? Like, we don't remember everything, but we start to develop a sense of how to find answers. And a good programmer is one who has developed a curiosity about the languages and tools they're using. You should start out and pick a language and framework and try and explore it. I think most code bases do not utilize the majority of the language's abilities. I don't know if you've seen this. It's popular, XKCD. It's a diagram to help the less technical savvy be as technically savvy as the rest of us. I won't read it, but essentially it's like, find something that looks like it's heading in the right direction, try it. If not, find another thing that looks like it is, try it. And eventually you will have figured it out, or you'll have spent too much time on it and you should just ask for help at that point. And that's it, like, that's what we do. We just keep trying things. And that can be frustrating when we're in the moment, but it's the only way through it. All right, so here are some of the soft skills that I think have been really helpful to me. One, just try it. I can look at a line of code that I've written for 5-10 minutes without hitting the save button and without actually executing the code, because I'm just sitting there going, this probably isn't right. Is it right? Is this gonna work? It probably isn't right. Just do it, right? Listen to Shia. Don't do what he's doing with his hair. I don't know what that is, but just do it, right? Because what's going to happen is we could actually get an error, and errors are very helpful. Errors should become our best friends. As you work more and more with programmers, which really puzzled me at first, you'll find that when something just works, they don't like it, because now they have to figure out why it worked, right? Why did this work? You get an error and you can go, oh, it didn't work because of this. Now I know if I do that, it will work. So we shouldn't scroll past errors. They're very helpful. I get excited now when I see an error because it tells me something. And they point you to the problem. And I think when just starting out, one of the hardest things for us is language, right? How do I look up something I don't know? And errors give you terms. They give you language to say, oh, I need to know about how to define a method. How, why is this not recognizing my arguments, or whatever it might be. Pseudocode. Pseudocode is very helpful for just figuring it out, not the code part, but what you're trying to do. Here's a quick one I did. If hit song year is less than year 2000, then never liked it anyway. Unless hit song artist is Billie Eilish, then or else liked it before everyone else, right? And then I looked at this and I went, oh, I can actually clarify this logic a little bit more. I can say if hit song year is less than year 2000 and not hit song artist equals Billie Eilish, then never liked it, else liked it before everyone else. And so I think pseudocode helps us to understand what we're trying to accomplish. You don't worry about whether it's legitimate, whether it's going to work, anything. You're just saying, what am I trying to figure out here? What am I trying to get displayed or to happen if it's not a view later thing? The other thing is, if you now are fortunate enough to be working in a current code base, either because you're working on an open source thing or you're employed, we can find similar behavior already occurring a lot of times. And so when we can do that, we can try and understand what it's doing, why it works, and then tweak it for our necessity. The other thing with this, and it goes back to that curiosity, is you might sometimes find multiple ways that a thing is being done, which isn't good in programming. I'm sure we've all learned at this point. We like to be consistent and efficient. And when you see the same type of thing being done multiple ways, it means that it can probably be refactored, or it can be done in a way that's just consistent across the code base. And so when we find that, we get to explore how they're different, but still doing the same thing, what the benefits of each one are, and then we get to discuss it maybe with other people and listen to them argue and ultimately figure out what way we should do it. And part of that is learning to value constructive feedback. Hopefully, if we're presenting it to other people, even if we're not the ones making a decision, we'll hear someone that actually values a good, healthy, positive criticism. You can inspect other code bases with your developer tools. Sometimes, especially with JavaScript frameworks, the rendered view actually contains information that's being used programmatically. So in this case, if you look at that ng class there, this is from my beloved AngularJS. And we can see that we are applying a class of requirement failing. And we're doing that when one of two functions is passed correctly. Or actually, I should say when controller.getTotalCable has a value. Otherwise, we're not going to apply that class. And this is in the view layer. This is something you would see just by using your developer tools. So again, this gives us language to go look it up, to go read the documentation, to figure out what's being done with that. I just said it, read the docs. This actually could be done at any point, but it should probably be done earlier. Documentation is the authority on whatever we're doing. And I think our reaction, even mine to this day, after doing it 3.5 years, and I think it becomes less common the longer you've been working in it, but if we can start there, it'll be great, is to just type it into a search engine, copy and paste that error, see what comes up. I think we should go to the documentation first, because that's the authority. The person who wrote that either wrote the software that we're using, the language we're using, or they're working with the people that did. And again, it gives us language. It gives us terms that we can apply when we're trying to figure something out. Another one, we just mentioned search the internet. If you've done this at all, you know Stack Overflow is going to come up like number 1 or number 2. Stack Overflow is great. It is the most commonly used way, and because of that, that means there's going to be a lot of answers that might not be what you need, and there's going to be abandoned posts where someone asked the question in 2017 and then they didn't really get an answer and they never came back to it. The other thing is, for me, again, AngularJS, if I find an answer, a post that's from 2019, it might not be relevant to what I'm trying to figure out. So we need to look at the dates on things. Hopefully, if you're just building something on your own locally for yourself, you're using something that's latest stable. And even then, that's important now because we don't want to see necessarily the answer from 2012. We want something from around the time that our version was released. It's not to say that those dated or more recent posts won't have information we need. They might. It just means that we're going to have to extract it and put it in the context of our current confinements. And honestly, if it's me, I'm probably going to try and find something more applicable before I go back and read that one. Let's see. Oh, ask for help, right? I think hopefully we've all experienced that the programming community is really, really great. It's really helpful. Not only are programmers either by nature or by nurture people that like to learn, they're people that usually like to help others. And I think by being in the group you're in now, and hopefully if you aren't, I would recommend getting involved in other groups as well. You'll find people that just want to help. If someone doesn't want to help you, then leave them be, find someone else. And then make sure you update your status on Twitter or LinkedIn when you get the job. So here's just some tips for me. Distractions. Take inventory of your surroundings. Eliminate or at least try and minimize distractions. Let your roommate or your partner know, hey, I need an hour or 2 without distractions because I'm going to be really using my brain, trying to learn something. And if I have to split focus too much, it's not going to be helpful. Set yourself up for success. Have water, have snacks, make your workspace as comfortable as possible. Sit in a comfortable position. For me, I put on, I think Pam does this too, some sort of playlist that is not super distracting. I love music. I love music so much that if something has lyrics or is really exciting, I'm not going to pay attention to my work. I'm just going to start researching the band or trying to figure out what else exists in that vein. I listen to like chill beats or classical instrumentals or jazz that's not like avant, that's not super crazy. If you haven't tried a Pomodoro timer, I would suggest it. I think, I should have wrote this down, tomatotimer.com, I think is one where you essentially work in like a 20-minute stretch, and then you take 5 minutes off, and then 20 minutes, and then 5 minutes, and then at some point you take like a long break for lunch or whatever, you come back and do that. And I think for me, what's helpful is that as distracted as I might be or unmotivated at times, I can do 20 minutes. Like I can commit to that. And then when you do take that 5-minute break, don't look at your phone, don't surf the web, read a book, go for a quick walk, close your eyes, pet your dog or your cat, like do something that's not related to screens. Because how many of us have been looking for something or been trying to remember to tell someone something, and the more we think about it, the less we can actually find the thing or remember to do it. And I think that's true with programming too. When we let our minds go at ease, sometimes we come back and it's just like, oh, it's right there. I don't know how many times I've spent hours, like the last hours of my workday, trying to figure something out. And I go home, or at this case, go to bed, wake up, and as soon as I get settled in, it's like, oh, it's right there. It was super simple. Like I should have just moved this or saved it or whatever. It's really good. Teach it. I taught my wife JavaScript for loops. She could not tell you now how to do that, but she had fun. I think she had it print out meow like 572 times or whatever. But it helped me because when we're looking at something on screen, we have, I have this thing where I'll just think I know something well enough, I can just skip by it. But when you actually have to explain it to someone, then you actually have to understand it. And sometimes we can't do that with other people. So some developer, at this point, it could be Fable for all I know, but they came up with something called the rubber duck debugging. I don't know if you've heard of that. They literally had a rubber duck on their desk, and they went through line by line and explained to the rubber duck what was happening in the code base. And I think part of this is that, again, it's not going to let us skip past things we're fuzzy on if we're actually committed to doing it. And then science has shown when we verbalize things and we hear ourselves say them, we remember them more, right? And if someone hears you, you're not crazy, you're a programmer, and programmers are crazy, right? So here are just some resources that have been good for me. Learn Enough Society, I mentioned. They're really great. I don't think they're the cheapest, but they offer a scholarship, and all you have to do is apply for it, tell them, you know, your needs, why it would be beneficial, what, and I think now they've even updated to like, well, what can you afford to do? And 0 is oftentimes acceptable if that's really your case. And I haven't met anyone that doesn't get the scholarship. I would just say be honest, you know, if you can afford 10 or 12 bucks a month, $5 a month, just go with that. Stack Overflow, and it's on here because although it's oftentimes not what we need, I would highly suggest going on there, and when you see, make an account if you haven't yet, because I know sometimes we lurk on there, and when you see something that you can answer, even if it's super simple, do it. Just engage in the conversation, be part of it. The more we interact with other people in our field, the better it will be for us. Local meetups like the one you're a part of now are great. Here in Tulsa, there are maybe too many for one person to be involved in all of, but that's not the worst thing. I don't know how it is in Springfield, but pick a couple. You don't have to go every time, but be committed to going and talking to people and networking and sitting in on talks that are informative and interesting to you. If you can go to a conference, whether it be local or national, do it. I went to the Rails conference a few years ago. Oklahoma has a really good statewide organization. When you are around other developers and programmers, it's very beneficial. What you find is that, for example, we were at the Ruby on Rails conference in Pittsburgh, and a Google developer got in the elevator. And I don't know how it came up, probably just everyone asks, so what do you do? Who do you work for? He said Google. and a coworker at the time said, do you ever feel like you've made it because you're at Google? And he said, no, it's the opposite. I don't feel like imposter syndrome is a real thing, especially in programming. And he's like, at any point, I feel like someone's going to find me out. So you're not alone. That's just how it's part of life. And we find ways to cope with it and hopefully get past it. PHP Slack community, it's PySlackers, Ruby on Rails. There's a Slack community for any language or framework you're working on. And what's great about those is, especially these languages listed and the other popular ones, there's instantaneous feedback. If you're stuck on something, you can just ask and you will get help. At least someone will try to help you. One thing I would mention is that there are really great ways to ask for help and really bad ways. In the Oklahoma one, there was a gentleman who would just say, hey, I need to know how to do this. Hey, I need to know this. Hey, I need to do that. And eventually, although you might not be doing this, people will start to interpret as, you just want me to do it for you, right? A really great way to ask questions is, I've tried to do this, this, and this, and I can't figure out what's blocking me. Once you do that, most people are gonna go, oh, like they're really putting effort in and they just need a little bit of guidance. They're not asking me to do it for them. They just need some help. I'd recommend that. I put this up here because it was just hilarious to me. Coming from Rails and now working in Django, this person asked, is there a Django Slack I can join? And the first response, and there's not many points on this Reddit post, but the first one is, no, it's an IRC channel, which is like super old. And the next person, please no, because Django developers just stereotypically have to do things their own way, right? Just thought it was funny. But I did reach out. I thought, I'm giving this talk about technical sophistication that I've learned, at least in part from this guy I don't know, Michael Hartle, who coined the term. I should ask him what he'd want other people to know, and specifically, I said, I'm doing it tonight. And he said, just remind people that technical sophistication is like a muscle. It gets stronger every time you use it. So drink from the fire hose. It'll be okay. We won't capture everything that's thrown at us, but the more we're around it, the more we're exposed to it, the more we will learn. Even if we're not grasping 90% of it, grab what you can and try again the next time, and you will learn a little bit more. I made this presentation available in a GitHub repo. So if I went too quick on anything, feel free to just pull that down and use it as you wish. And that's all I have for you.
Whoop, whoop. Clapping sound. There we go. Did anybody have any questions for John? Comments?
I do. So my question is, so right now I'm a student, and so I'm just wondering, like, how is the learning curve for, like, when you have that first job, like, how accommodating is the employer in terms of, like, technical sophistication, like that whole
Sure.
learning curve bit?
It all depends, right? And so, especially in our part of the country, in Missouri and in Oklahoma, we don't have, unless you're lucky enough and they exist, to get like a junior level remote job or find a really great company in Springfield. You can find them. They're fewer and further between. And so sometimes my first job, not my first job, I worked in PHP very, very briefly, and I really didn't have to do any PHP. It was all HTML and CSS. But I quickly left that job for a junior role in Ruby on Rails with a company here in town. And one of the reasons I think it was good was because the lead that I had was part of the tech community in Tulsa, was actively like contributing and teaching. And so they were good about that. So your tech meetups are going to be great places to network and to find people. I had to learn on the job, and that was good and bad. Good in that they said, here's your job, welcome, you're now a programmer, right? But they expected me to complete a course not while I was at work, which was fine. That was something I was willing to take on. If you look for a junior job or an entry-level job, they will be much, much, much more accommodating. If you find something that's like, we want 3 or 4 years of experience, I wouldn't count it out, but just, they might not, when you're upfront in the interview, they might say, it's not what we're looking for right now. But that's what I'd look for, a junior entry level. You'll find it. It'll be there.
Actually, I have another question. So, so you said like your first programming job was using PHP, and so let's say in the job description, they have a list of all the languages that they use, but you just don't know a few. Is it still worth applying for and just being honest up front?
It's worth applying for, and this is why this skill of technical sophistication is so good, right? I had never programmed in Python or Django when I got the job I have now. And that's exclusively what it is. It's Python Django with an Angular JS front end, which I had not touched any of those things. But during the interview, because these languages are different mainly syntactically, they just want to know that you understand some key concepts. So I think they asked me, and it wasn't like a Google interview, but they asked me like, how would you know if 2 strings contain the exact same letters as each other? And at first they said, can you write it out? Which I've never it's so intimidating if someone says, can you write this on a whiteboard? They said, can you write this out in Python? And I said, no. I said, I could do it in Ruby. I could do it in JavaScript. And I think because they didn't know Ruby or you'll find if you haven't already, there are a lot of people who really hate JavaScript. They just said, can you do it in pseudocode, right? Can you do this for me in pseudocode? So I said, yeah, I would take this first string and I would organize it alphabetically, and I would do the same with the second string, and then I would ask if they were the same as each other. It's like, oh, okay, I guess that's it. So as long as you can show that you have the desire to learn and that you understand some programming concepts, the languages and the frameworks start to matter less. Of course, if someone comes in and they're like, yeah, I know all these, there's a good chance they'll get the job. But I don't know exactly how it is in Springfield, but in Tulsa, there are specific languages that people are hiring for, and the market really doesn't offer it. And so if you can just come in and say, I'm willing to learn, then they're more often than not willing to work with you.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. That was good.
Cool. Well, with that, unless anybody else has any other questions or comments, we can wrap it up here. But thank you so much, John. This was awesome. And just so everybody knows, I was recording. If you have any issues with that, please let me know before I post it. But I'll post this in our Facebook group so that we can refer to this later as well. But thank you, John. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah,
Great.
Burnett asked a lot of questions that I was going to ask, so thanks for
Wonderful.
asking them, Burnett.
You're welcome.
Also, John's the nicest and always super helpful. I'm speaking for him right now, but I'm sure if you guys have any questions, you can reach out to him later.
Yeah,
Good
please
stuff.
do.
And as long as you ask him in the right way, I'm sure he'd be happy to help you.
I'm not that hungry. Thank you. It's been great. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
So ask him in the right way. Don't go, so I'm working on this homework assignment.
Yeah,
What is
Want
the
me
answer
to do
to
this?
this?
How do I do this?
Exactly.
Hey, can you have this work done for me by 9 a.m. tomorrow? That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Cool. Well, I'm going to stop recording now.